Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new League of Legends video. Yasuo, a champion that I feel like I have not talked with you guys about for quite some time other than maybe a full game commentary here or there. I've been seeing a lot of questions, whether it's directed towards myself or just in general, of people asking, is Yasuo good right now? Is he strong? Should I play him? If I do play him, what's the best keystone? What items do I get? Phantom Dancer, Static Shift, Infinity Edge, Triforce, what's the best combination? And just a whole bunch of questions like that. So I figured it's finally time to talk about this samurai. As I'm sure most of you know, he's easily one of my favorite champions in League of Legends next to Zed, so I'm always excited to make a video about this champion. So throughout this video guys, as usual, we'll go over the positives, negatives, tips and tricks, abilities, summoner spells. I'll tell you about all the different builds you can do and when you should do which, the best keystone to use in what scenario, and my final rating at the end of the video. So right before we get into things, the question I want to ask you guys is, what is your favorite champion to play? And if you end up enjoying the video, make sure to hit that like button. I put a lot more work into this one. Alright, so the first thing we'll start off by talking about, as usual in these types of videos, are the positives and negatives of Yasuo. What's good about him right now? What's bad? Why should you play him? And things like that. So one of the coolest things about this champion is the fact that there's such a huge variety and different ways you can actually play him successfully. Whether that's through different types of items you can buy on him, the runes, the different masteries and keystones, it all can work to a certain extent. He also has one of the best abilities in League of Legends, his wind wall, being able to block essentially almost any type of projectile a champion can throw out. And with the tanky-ish meta being back, while Yasuo having the ridiculously strong armor shred on his ultimate is quite effective when fighting them. He can also be played successfully whether it's mid lane or top lane, but you will have to switch around your build and keystones based on the matchup. When it comes to snowballing, I mean, if you get ahead with Yasuo, you are going to be very strong and difficult to deal with. You can team fight very well since obviously you have the knockup, you have that AoE ultimate as well that has a lot of synergy with many other champions. You can also opt for the split pushing path where, especially if you have the exhaust, can be very successful as well. He's just a very fun champion that has a lot of options and different ways you can play him to success that overall makes him a pretty nice champion. However, on the negative side, well, there's still quite a bit of bugs with Yasuo, especially after your ultimate where you can't auto attack for a couple of seconds. His laning phase is extremely difficult to play, especially in the higher elo where it's very easy to mess up and fall behind. He doesn't have any type of ranged harass obviously except for his third Q, but you don't really have that up very often and you are required to be somewhat close in range in order to even get that third Q. And Yasuo's kit just naturally makes you be in the middle of team fights quite often, especially with his ultimate, so it does mean that probably you will be dying very often, unless you are extremely careful with how you play him. So he's definitely strong at the very moment if you play him correctly, especially if you go for the tankier type build. But let's quickly talk about some tips and tricks when playing Yasuo that I highly recommend you keep in mind. So kill death assist, your KDA, it's a minor factor when you're playing Yasuo. I want you to really understand this because Yasuo, like I said, with his kit and how it works, it does mean that a lot of the times you will be in the middle of the fight, you will be focused and you will be dying. But chances are your death set up a nice play for your team to make something else happen. It's just the nature of his playstyle for the most part. And another extremely important thing that definitely separates the good and bad Yasuos is knowing when you can play passively and knowing when you can play aggressively, especially in the laning phase based on the matchup and the jungler. This comes with experience and just really playing a lot of Yasuo, but it is something I want you guys to pay attention to when you are playing Yasuo. And how well you use your E ability and how effectively you do is also another huge factor that separates the good Yasuos and the bad, so practice your E mechanics. So here's 3 very important tricks that are also very simple. In the first example, it's knowing when you can use your E ability followed by the auto attack for the spin, knock them up, maybe put in another auto attack and then run away, kind of like you see on this MF example right here. Or when you're trying to get the quick ultimate to go in for the kill. But here's the other version of that, and this one does a lot more damage, but again, you need a little bit more time to do it. You E on the target or a minion to get in range, you auto attack, reset the auto attack with the Q, and then essentially just go in for the kill. It's the difference between knowing when you EQ for the spin or when you E auto attack you for the extra damage on the auto attack reset. And here's the third trick. You can use your wind wall to animation cancel your Q, especially for the tornado. This can easily catch people off guard and you are essentially doing 2 things in one. You can also auto attack a target when you knock them up with with your Q before you use the ultimate for just a little bit of extra damage, which sometimes can be the difference between getting a kill and not getting a kill or even dying. And like I said earlier, Yasuo's ultimate is essentially a free last whisper. It shreds through armor, so against tanks it could be quite effective. Do not forget that. Next, let's briefly touch on what summoners and how you level your abilities on Yasuo. First and foremost, his abilities. Usually you want to start with the Q, but sometimes on rare occasions you can start with your E at level 1. However, if you do opt for the E at level 1 path, it is going to be very difficult for you to make use of it in lane, and it will take a lot of practice, or else you're just going to get out-traded and you probably will lose the lane just because of that. But whichever path you choose, either way you are going to be maxing your E ability first, followed by the Q, W, and then ultimate whenever you can. And the reason is quite simple. You just get a lot more benefits and stats from putting points in your E versus putting the points into your Q. For summoners, I'm really liking Flash Exhaust at the moment. It gives you a lot of playmaking potential in lane. It gives you huge 1v1 dueling potential when you split push in a team fight. So I highly recommend that. But you can also go either Ignite in mid lane or you can go Teleport in top lane. And with all that finally out of the way, let's move into the biggest part in my opinion of the video, the one that everyone wants to probably see. The masteries and keystones, the runes, and which items do you get on Yasuo and when. So talking about the runes first. Now with Yasuo, there can be so many different rune pages you can run successfully. But here's the one that I personally like. So for reds, I have flat AD. For quints, I have 3 attack speed quints, flat armor yellow, and flat magic resistance blues. You can switch this up and maybe remove one of the quints for a lifesteal. You can put in some attack speed in the reds if you so choose. You can get HP per level for the yellows instead as well, or even MR per level blues. It really just comes down to what you personally prefer and what you are facing. So next we'll talk about the mastery pages, and more importantly, which keystone do you take? So let's first talk about Fervor of Battle. Now much to my surprise, I have to say of the 3, this one I probably prefer the least. That's not to say that it is bad, I just feel like right now, especially for Yasuo, the other 2 are better. However, with that being said, Fervor of Battle is quite strong when it comes to the laning phase. It does give him a lot of damage. Yasuo can activate the stacks fairly easily. His Q will proc the damage, it'll scale okay until late game, but mainly you get it to be aggressive in the laning phase and just give you that little bit of extra damage to get the kills. Then we have Warlord's Bloodlust. Here's when I was a little surprised because at first I thought it was horrible, but as I kept trying it out and experimenting, I have to say, this one is starting to feel very, very good. So at the moment, this is my personal go-to for most scenarios. But especially if you're playing whether it's mid lane or top lane against a ranged opponent, someone who you probably won't be auto-attacking too often but might be taking some harass. This will help you a lot because not only do you get that lifesteal so you can get back the HP by attacking the minions fairly quickly, but with the lifesteal, especially if you get Phantom Dancer and Steric's Gauge, it works very, very well and it gives you more effective HP. So my personal go-to just because lifesteal feels so strong right now. And the final one is Grasp of the Undying. It is very similar to Warlord's Bloodlust because they both essentially give you lifesteal, but Grasp essentially gives you more damage into your kit. So if you're top or mid against a melee opponent, someone who you feel like you can't auto attack very often to consistently get the Grasp of the Undying damage off, then this can be a very strong keystone. So if Warlord's Bloodlust just doesn't seem like it's perfect for the situation I'm in, then I definitely go for Grasp of the Undying instead, but usually only against melee opponents. And here's an example of how the actual mastery pages can look like. I'm not going to talk too much about this. You can see one is with an example of Grasp of the Undying, and the second one at the bottom right is if you choose to go for Warlord's Bloodlust or Fervor of Battle. The pages themselves should be fairly self-explanatory. But now that we got that big topic out of the way, there's still one more big topic to talk about. What items do I get? So first you need to ask yourself, do I want to get Static Shift or do I want to get Phantom Dancer? And here's the difference. Static Shift is great for mid lane specifically in my opinion because it lets you push in the wave and then go roam and do stuff. It also works well in teamfights because of the lightning damage that you do. This is really just a more aggressive version of Phantom Dancer. But on the flip side, Phantom Dancer is great if you want to split push. It works very well with Yasuo's E since it does give you the extra move speed. It also gives you the damage reduction, which with lifesteal makes it very, very effective. Right now I personally prefer Phantom Dancer because not only does it feel safer, but it just feels better. It's cheaper and it also offers you more attack speed. And then we have Triforce versus Infinity Edge. It shouldn't matter too much which one you chose between Static Shift and PD when it comes to choosing one of these two right here. But let's first talk about Infinity Edge. So without question, this is the more aggressive option, and it honestly works quite well whether you get Static Shift or Phantom Dancer. Now, even though this is definitely still a very good option, especially if you're playing mid lane. I mainly recommend getting this if you feel like you can snowball and win the game, carry it hard if you're doing well in the laning phase and things like that. It's the slightly more riskier option. But if you took Warlord's Bloodlust, then this can work very well because of the high crit damage and lifesteal potential. But if you took Grasp of the Undying, then it's not that amazing. And especially then is when you probably want to look at Trinity Force instead. This is definitely the safer option instead of Infinity Edge. That's not to say that you deal a substantial less amount of damage. In fact, your damage will still be quite nice. The build path for Trinity Force is lovely. I mean, the Phage is nice, it gives you extra HP, good dueling power. The Zeal gives you obviously the crit chance and attack speed that you need. The Sheen gives you nice Q damage as well, which works on towers when you Q the air and then auto attack the tower. This works even better with Phantom Dancer since it gives you even more move speed, which helps your E ability as well. And if you want to go the slightly more bruiser, tanky type option, or your team needs a little bit of extra tankiness, Triforce is easily the way to go. I don't really prefer one over the other, I think they're both fantastic. However, if I'm top lane, usually I'll go Triforce. If I'm mid lane, usually I'll go Infinity Edge. Let's quickly go over how the standard build can look like. Doran's Blade is usually my go-to, but if you're against a ranged aggressive opponent, the shield could be quite nice. You then have the 4 items between Static Shiv, PD, Triforce, and IE that I just went over. Following that, Bloodthirster is fantastic. The extra lifesteal, the shield it provides, it just works. And in terms of boots, well, the boots of swiftness for your E ability are lovely. I really like them, but again, if you need the MR and CC reduction, Merc boots are nice. If you need extra armor, then you get the armor boots instead. For the other options, I usually recommend looking between the Mercurial Scimitar, the Sterak's Gauge, and then you have the Mav Malmortius. If there's a lot of AP, Mav Malmortius is lovely. And especially if you went the Trinity Force path, Sterak's Gauge is amazing. If they have an abundance of tanks, Blade of the Rune King can also be a fairly decent option. And let's finally end off this video with my final rating. 7.5 out of 10 for Yasuo at the very moment. He's one of those champions where he'll either be extremely fed and absolutely demolish everyone's face, or it'll be quite the opposite. He'll be getting his face demolished and probably feeding quite a bit. It all depends on how skilled you are at Yasuo, because he is a very difficult champion. I don't care what you say, he is not easy to play, especially in high elo. He has among the hardest laning phases of many champions, but on the flip side, if you truly understand this champion and if you are a master at him, he can have one of the best laning phases. So I definitely recommend playing him, but it will take quite a bit of games to truly understand how he works, how to make the greatest use of his abilities and mechanics, and just overall become a great Yasuo player. But that is about it for this video, guys. I hope I covered everything I needed to cover. Hope you now truly understand maybe how to play him, what keystone to get, what items, runes, and all of that good stuff. If you did enjoy this one, please definitely hit that like button to show your support. Put a lot more work into this one because it is about Yasuo. Share this with your friends because I know there's a lot of people asking many questions that are covered in this video as well. Subscribe if you haven't, make sure to check out my other videos as well, and I really hope to see you for the next one. Peace.